Assalamu alaikum. Here we know about trauma. What is trauma and how it affects on our life? Trauma is an emotional response to tribal events like an incident, accidents, rape, or natural disasters. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headache or nausea. It does not discrimination that it perceives thoughts of the world. A World Mental Health Survey conducted the World Health Organization found that at least a third of more than 125,000 people surveyed in 26 different countries had experienced trauma. That number rose to 70% when the group was limited to people experiencing core disorders as identified by the DSM-4, the classification found in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, 4th edition. But those members are just for intents that have been reported. The actual number is probably much higher. Childhood trauma. Research indicates that children are specifically vulnerable to trauma because their brains are still developing. Children experience a heightened state of stress during tribal events and their bodies release hormones related to stress and fear. This type of developmental trauma can disrupt normal brain development. As a result of trauma, especially ongoing trauma, can significantly affect a child's long-term behavior, emotional development, mental health, physical health, and behaviors. The sense of fear and helplessness may persist into adulthood. It leaves the person at a significant higher risk stress sources of the effect of future trauma. Types of trauma includes emotional and physical type. In mental response to a disrupting events or situations, three types of trauma are as acute, chronic, and complex. Acute trauma results from a single stressful or dangerous event, while chronic trauma results from repeated and prolonged exposure to high stressful events. Examples include cases of child abuse, bullying, or domestic violence. While complex trauma results from exposure to multiple traumatic events. Secondary trauma is another type of trauma. With this form of trauma, a person develops trauma symptoms from close contact with someone who has experienced a traumatic event. Family members, mental health professionals, and others who care for those who have experienced a traumatic events are at high risk of various trauma. The symptoms often mirror those of PTSD and post traumatic stress disorder. People who have experienced trauma are symptoms of trauma. Response to traumatic events vary significantly among people, but there are some basic common symptoms. Emotional signs includes sadness, anger, denial, fear, and shame. These may lead to nightmares, insomnia, difficulty with relationships, and emotional outbursts. While common physical symptoms include nausea, dizziness, altered sleep patterns, change in appetite, headaches, psychological disorders may include PTSD, like post traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, dissociative disorders, and substance abuse problems. What causes trauma? Anything that is too fast, too much, or too soon for our nervous system to handle. Trauma can be caused by an overwhelming negative events that causes a lasting impact on the victim's mental and emotional stabilities. While many sources of trauma are physically violent in nature, others are psychological. Some common sources of trauma include rape, domestic violence, and natural disasters. While service illness or injury, the death of a loved one, witnessing an act of violence. Trauma is often but not always associated with being present at the site of a trauma inducing events. It is also possible to sustain trauma after witnessing something from a distance. You young children are especially vulnerable to trauma and should be psychologically examined after traumatic events has occurred to ensure their emotional well-being. What therapy treats trauma? Trauma therapy aims to manage and lessen the effect of trauma. Therapy is the first line treatment for trauma. Early, an individual will work with a trauma informed and trauma focused therapist. Types of therapy a person with trauma could be benefit from includes cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT help people to change their behavior patterns in thoughts and influence to their behaviors and emotions. Evident trust source supports CBT as the most effective approach for PTSD. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing EMDR is another common trauma therapy. During EMDR, individuals briefly relieve specific traumatic experience while the therapist tracks their eye movement. EMDR aims to help people process and integrate traumatic memories. Several randomized controlled trust justice studies have demonstrated that EMDR is an effective treatment for PTSD. Somatic therapies. These therapies include somatic experiences. This approach includes a therapy helping a person to relieve traumatic memories in a safe space. Sensor motor psychotherapy. This type of therapy combines psychotherapy with body based techniques to turn traumatic memories into source of strength. Touch therapy. Other touch therapy includes Reiki, healing touch, and therapeutic touch therapy. Medications alone cannot cure trauma for PTSD, but it also helps a person manage symptoms such as anxiety, depression, and sleep disturbance. A person should talk to the doctor about their options. Self care. Practicing self care can help individuals to cope with the emotional, psychological, and physical symptoms of trauma. Examples of self care for trauma includes exercise. Trauma can actively the body flight and fight responses. Exercise may mitigate some of these effects.